Curiosity isn't always just a game. It isn't just wide eyes and innocent questions. Sometimes it's a slow descent into the parts of you sealed off long ago. True curiosity doesn't just observe, it unearths. And once you start digging, you might not like what looks back. Hello, friend, and welcome to Torches, Yoga and Mindfulness. I'm Lauren, a mindfulness coach, and today I'll be your guide through the strange spaces between self-awareness and the supernatural. This is a special 8-episode series I have created that I call Stillness in the Dark. And the title of today's story is A Beast in the Basement, where our curiosity is the only thing keeping the beast at bay. Ricky was 16. He was quiet, not because he was shy, he just preferred to observe. It was like he'd learned early that keeping his mouth shut was the safest way to keep everything inside from spilling out. He wasn't a popular kid, but he had a solid friend group that he'd grown up with in the same neighborhood, and they'd all pretty much gone to school together since elementary school. He lived with his mother and his younger sister in a house near the edge of town. The house was old, like the kind of place with the floorboards that moaned in the night and the doorways that were slanted due to age, causing the doors to creak. Ricky didn't mind the creaks and groans, but he hated the basement. It wasn't just the dark or the smell, it was the way sound seemed to bend when you were down there. Your footsteps would sound like they were coming from someone else in another room. And every time he was down there, chills would just race up and down his body. He used to think it was just the dark, unfinished rooms that were down there that creeped him out. But sometimes when he was in the house alone, he would hear something that sounded like breathing coming from below. Their washer and dryer were down there, and every time his mom asked him to grab the laundry, Ricky would try to come up with some excuse as to why he couldn't. He was too busy. But she would just tell him he's being dramatic. And really, he thought so too, but that didn't change the fact that his stomach would do a somersault, his ears would ring, and the hairs would stand on the back of his neck every time he just thought about going down those stairs. Until one Friday, he was just coming home from school, walking in with his backpack and his skateboard in his hands. As he was getting into the hall, right near the basement door, he dropped his book bag and board, and his board kind of bounced and knocked against the basement door. And then something knocked back. He felt the familiar somersault in his gut, felt his whole body get hot with fear, ready to run. He scrambled up the stairs to his room, not daring to come out until his mom and sister were home later that evening. The next day, he slept in later than he normally would on the weekends because he had spent all night straining to listen for other sounds from the basement, waiting and ready, not wanting to be caught off guard. By afternoon, rain was beating on the windows. The power had flickered out twice already. Ricky was in his room, headphones on and drawing, trying to get rid of that jittery feeling he had in his chest. That's when he heard his sister scream. He tore off his headphones and ran downstairs where he heard her scream come from. She was standing frozen in the hall, staring directly at the basement door. He slowly walked up to her and she leaned closer to him, but didn't move her eyes from the door. "The laundry basket moved," she whispered, pointing to his basket he had left next to the door. "It moved on its own," she said again. The basket was sitting upright, and it looked pretty much how he remembered it when he had left it there, but the basement door was cracked, just a tiny bit open. He didn't want to make her any more nervous. He said it's probably just this old house and the wind and a draft. It's just like that. He stepped around her to close the door. Reaching for the doorknob, he heard that heavy breathing again. It almost reminded him of the bears he would see on the Discovery Channel. But there was something fearfully different. Ricky quickly pushed the door shut and offered to make them a snack of toasted cheesers. This was their favorite snack, which their mom swore she invented. Instead of a regular grilled cheese sandwich, she would toast a piece of bread in the oven, usually using two kinds of cheese, and his favorite was Munster and provolone with mustard on it after it was toasted. While making their snack, he was so distracted he almost burned the bread. He cursed himself for messing up everything, for being scared of the basement, for not being stronger or braver. His sister was used to Ricky mumbling cuss words and inaudible frustrations under his breath, but she noticed this time he seemed angrier. It always made her anxious when he was like this, so she retreated with her tablet to the living room. From the kitchen where Ricky stood waiting for the toast, you can see just down the hall enough to see the edge of the basement door. He couldn't keep his eyes off of it, just waiting for it to reopen. That evening, when their mom got home, they decided they were not going to tell her about this encounter. She was already getting so frustrated with their stories of this monster in the basement. That night, Ricky couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the noises in the basement, and every time he closed his eyes, his mind would start to conjure these images of what could be down there. He noticed he was just getting himself more and more worked up and just outright terrified and scared from these thoughts. He would tell himself, I don't know that that's what's making this noise. My imagination is just running wild. I'm just making myself more afraid of what I think it is more than the actual noises themselves. He started to criticize himself for being so scared. He tried to bury himself in the dark of his covers, but he felt himself getting more and more frustrated because now he felt like he was lying to himself. He may not know the details of the beast that was in their basement, but he knew something is down there. He was yanked out of this thought spiral when he thought he heard a thud or a bump coming from below. Now he wasn't just frustrated, he was outright angry with himself. He was supposed to be on guard, but he couldn't even manage to do that right because his mind is just racing. How long had he been lost in this thought? And had he missed any other sounds? Did that sound like it came from the basement, or was it even closer? He strained to listen over the hum of the central AC. He couldn't hear anything, and he knew he was going to have to go out into the hall to actually be able to listen better. His chest tightened with that thought, and his legs felt shaky as he kicked back the blankets. But that only lasted a few moments until he was sitting upright on the edge of the bed. Now his legs were completely numb, like they were absolutely refusing to move him from this space of safety. He took a deep breath, grabbed the flashlight from his drawer, and with another thought, fed his frustration about how if his mom just let him have a dog like he wanted, he would at least have some type of partner in this. It was about 2 in the morning, and his mom and sister were fast asleep, and the house was silent. He crept down the stairs, encouraging his legs to keep pushing through with each step. His heart was pounding, and he felt like his stomach was in his throat. He made it to the bottom of the stairs. As soon as he had a clear view of the basement door, he felt the hairs stand on the back of his neck. He started to second guess all of this, thinking maybe he could go get his mom and make her understand, make her open the door with him. But if this thing didn't show itself like before, when they would try to explain to her the weird noises, he knew waking her up at 2 a.m. for this would be bad. He tried to take a deep breath, but his chest was so tight, his breath just kind of wheezed. He reached a trembling hand for the doorknob and slowly opened the door just a few inches at first so that he could see in, but also close it real quick if he needed to, depending what was on the other side of the door. The stairs were steep, and there was a light switch right inside the door, but the low-watt bulb only illuminated half the staircase, and you had to make it to the bottom to get to the switch that turned on the main light for the basement. He flipped the switch, and the light flickered on, shining its dull amber hue over the stairs. Their basement was pretty big. It wasn't just a simple room with the washer and dryer, but it was pretty much the size of their home. It was considered an unfinished basement. It had walls up to create a couple different rooms, but there weren't any door hungs or even lights in them. And the staircase came down like in the middle of the main rooms, which Ricky thought was just stupid. It was the open kind of staircase too, where you just have simple railings on each side and then spaces between the stairs. Perfect for someone or something to be able to reach right through and grab your ankles. Ricky opened the door all the way, turned on his flashlight, and kind of stooped down to peer and see under and around the staircase. He held the railing tight. He took his first step down, then another and another. Chills were rushing over his body, and he had goosebumps up and down his arms and legs. He could hear that heavy, wet breathing. He had been so focused on getting his legs and feet to move down the stairs, he wasn't even sure when it started, but he could hear it over off to the right near one of the unfinished rooms. He shined his flashlight in that direction of the breathing and saw something dart into the darkness, into the other room. At this, Ricky froze. He could still hear the breathing. The last few steps of the staircase to get to the other light switch were in darkness, and he just couldn't bring himself to step out of the dim amber light and into the pitch black. The breathing shifted, and now it sounded more like a growl, growing louder and louder. That was enough for him. He ran back up the stairs, diving into the hallway, slammed the door shut behind him. Once he realized how loud the door slamming was, he got anxious that it might have woken up his mom. So he raced back up to his room as quietly as he could before she could come out to investigate. He got back under his covers and tried to process what just happened. He did confirm there is something down there. Though it was dark, he knows he saw something. He was so mad that he couldn't make it to the bottom of the stairs to turn the overhead light on. He was getting more frustrated with his mom for not believing him. And he was even getting mad at this monster, this thing, because why wouldn't it make itself noticeable to his mom? Why is it trying to make it look like he's lying? Ricky finally drifted off to sleep somewhere lost in the spiral. The next morning, he tried to forget it. He kept telling himself it was just a dream, just his imagination. And even if it wasn't, no one would believe him or do anything about it. So he felt like there was just nothing he could do. His sister and mom both noticed he was in a bad mood. His mom tried to cheer him up with a nice breakfast of pancakes and scrambled eggs, but he just stabbed at his food with his fork. After breakfast, he grabbed his skateboard and headed to the skate park that was down the street. He was struggling with his normal tricks, and it seemed like he was finding every rock in the sidewalk. He had already begun to feel furious when he noticed that the park was starting to get busy, and it looked like people were setting up for a birthday party. The last thing he wanted was to be around a bunch of screaming kids. Ricky snatched up his board and stomped home. When he got home, he went straight to his room, slammed the door shut, put on his headphones loud enough to drown out his anger. Once he felt more like himself, he grabbed his sketchbook and a pencil. Normally, he liked to draw people or animals or just freehand designs, and sometimes he would draw himself as a rock star on stage in front of a huge crowd. But this time, when he held the pencil in his hand, it almost seemed far away, disconnected somehow. He had never really before considered how it felt to grip a pencil in his hand, but this wasn't it. This wasn't right. It felt like trying to write with your non-dominant hand. As he put his pencil to paper, he felt like his hand had a mind of its own, sketching an image he couldn't picture in his mind's eye like he does with his others. His hand was dancing across the page, starting some parts of the picture but frantically moving to another before the last one was even finished. He thought, I'll just drop the pencil. I'm just going to let it go. But it was like his hand had a mind of his own and it wasn't his anymore. It just kept racing over the page, sketching something dark and twisted. The frantic scribbles started to take form. It was a room with a corner, and hunched in the corner was the same dark figure Ricky had seen in the basement the night before. Its eyes were wide set, pitch black like polished onyx, sunk deep into its face. Its arms and legs were too long, awkwardly jointed, like a spider that tried to walk upright. Each hand splayed into bony fingers like branches, sharp and crooked, like the dead limbs torn from a tree. Its skin, or whatever, wrapped its body, wasn't smooth, but rippled and stretched like it had been stitched together. As Ricky stared at it, he swore the lines seemed to come alive and shiver on the page. From this picture, this monster, this creature, it kept its eyes locked on Ricky. He ripped the picture from his sketchbook, folded it up, and shoved it into the back of his drawer, right next to his flashlight. At dinner that night, his mom and sister were relieved to see that he actually didn't seem that mad anymore, like he had been in the morning. But they still ate quietly so as not to upset him again. After they ate, Ricky helped his sister clean up, and then he sat on the couch watching TV. But really, he was just waiting for time to pass, waiting for when everybody else would be asleep and when the house would be quiet, aside from the rhythmic breathing of the beast. He decided he was going to face it tonight, once and for all. He wasn't going to back out. He wasn't going back out of bravery, but out of need. He needed to know what it was and why it was tormenting his family. He went to his room around 10 at his usual time, but he didn't hide under the covers this night. He sat on the edge of his bed, studying the picture. When he felt like enough time had passed for his mom and sister to be asleep, he grabbed his flashlight and quietly made his way to the basement door. Before he even approached the door, he could hear its deep, raspy breathing. It sounded more active tonight, too, like maybe it was pacing back and forth. When he put his hand on the doorknob, the breathing and the pacing stopped. He opened the door just enough to slide his hand in to hit the light switch. And once the amber glow spilled back through the cracks in the door, he threw it open, shining his flashlight all around the basement below. He didn't see anything, and he didn't see any movement. So before he could think about it too much, he raced down the stairs and flipped on the main overhead light. He frantically whipped his head around, shining his flashlight in the dark corners of the basement, listening. But it was quiet. He felt a sensation of heat coursing through his body. He just wanted to scream at whatever this was. He held his breath for a moment to better listen, and he could hear it again, coming from off to the right, that corner room where it had been hiding the night before. The breathing was heavier now, slower, almost expectant. He tightened his grip on the flashlight and moved towards the sound. The overhead light didn't reach this far. He stepped through the open doorway into the shadowed room, the beam of his flashlight jittering against the walls with every heartbeat. And there it was, hunched in the farthest corner where the cement wall met the foundation, almost melting into the dark, but unmistakably there. Its limbs unfolded slowly, creaking like overwound branches in the wind. Its eyes opened, those same polished black stones from his drawing. The creature's chest rose and fell with deep, thunderous breaths, and its fingers clicked as they flexed, long, gnarled, and curling like dead twigs. Ricky froze. He wanted to run, he wanted to scream, but he didn't. He tried to take a deep breath, and ragged as it was, he managed a little, and a thought sparked in his mind. What are you? He didn't say it out loud, but somehow the thing responded. It straightened its posture a little, but enough that Ricky could feel his eyes on him, watching him, not with hunger or menace, but with recognition. The flashlight in his hand shook. The beam of light trembled over the creature's form. The skin that wasn't skin, but something like wrapped, warped rubber and damp, wrinkled parchment that had been stretched and ripped and sewn back together, like it had been broken 100 times and always forced to reform itself. And there was something else Ricky noticed. Around his neck, like a collar, tattered and torn, were the remnants of a t-shirt. It was soiled and barely there, but Ricky could make out the faint, faded cartoon character on the logo. His mind flashed to a family trip they had taken when he was about 7 or 8 years old. His sister at the time would have been about 4 or 5, and his parents were still together. Ricky remembers spilling a drink in the car all over himself while they were on a road trip, and he remembers the sweet smell of the root beer filling the cabin of the SUV, and his dad noticing before Ricky could try to clean it up. He remembers how so very angry he got. They had to pull over at the next gas station, a Buc-ee's. They had to get him a dry shirt for the rest of the trip, and it had the store's famous beaver mascot on it. Ricky stepped back, his heart pounding so hard it hurt, and the thing shifted again, but it wasn't moving closer to Ricky. It was cowering, like it was trying to shrink back into the corner, pulling its gnarled arms over its head with its finger pulling against its scalp like it was trying to make itself disappear. It was afraid. Ricky finally found his voice and asked, "Are you scared of me?" Its chest trembled, letting out a quiet gasp, like it was scared or confused. It didn't answer, but something inside Ricky did. More memories flooded forward, the outbursts he had with his mom after Dad left, breaking his sister's things and pretending like he didn't care, screaming into his pillow night after night when no one could hear. Every time he shoved something down instead of asking for help, every time he refused to look at what was growing inside him. His hands were shaking now, but he didn't lift the flashlight to shine it closer on the monster, to defend and excuse himself. He lowered the light. The room dimmed, shadows flickering across the walls. The creature peeked out from behind its talons. "I didn't want to see you," Ricky said quietly, "but I think I have always known you were there." The creature groaned, low and broken, not angry, just tired. It slowly reached one bony arm forward and then paused, trembling. Ricky didn't step back this time. "I'm not here to fight you. I just need to know what you are." The creature's chest rose and fell. And then, with a wheezing breath, it leaned forward just enough for its face to catch in the flashlight's glow, and it spoke, but not in words, in a sound that wasn't so much an audible sound, more like the memory of someone calling your name in a dream. It was like a mirror cracking inside Ricky's mind, 1,000 shards of every time he had ignored, denied, or pushed away what he felt. A single thought echoed through him. "I am what you fear most when you never ask why." Ricky swallowed hard. His heart was hammering, but something inside him softened just a little. Not because he was afraid, but because for the first time he was curious. Ricky took one step closer. The creature didn't retreat, but it didn't reach out again either. It just watched, motionless, like it didn't know if it was allowed to hope. Slowly, Ricky extended a trembling hand. He didn't touch its face or its claws. He reached for a place that seemed less dangerous. His fingers hovered for a breath and then lowered, just a gentle, caring hand on its shoulder. The skin was cold and damp, textured like rough bark or burned paper, but it didn't flinch. It let him, and something in the air shifted, not lighter or brighter, but less static, quieter. Ricky sat down next to the creature. The concrete was cold beneath him, and the air still felt thick, but something inside him unknotted. A few tears slipped down his face. He didn't wipe them away. There was grief there. For how long he had carried all of this alone, for how much of himself he had locked away in silence and anger, for the things he had said or hadn't said to his mom, to his sister. But underneath the grief was something else, a kind of soft knowing. He couldn't change what had already happened, but he could choose how to move forward. He could ask, he could listen, he could be curious even when it hurt. He looked over at the creature again. It hadn't moved, but it didn't need to. They weren't strangers anymore. All right, friend, that's my story for you this week. Before you head out, make sure if you're not already subscribed, go ahead and hit that notification bell and that subscription button so you don't miss next week, where we will meet a young woman standing between two stages of life. She is filled with uncertainty and surrounded by haunting whispers. Thank you so much for sharing a piece of your day with me, friends. Stay present, stay kind to yourself, and I will see you soon.